Hey everybody, Dave Rostello here, founder and CEO of Jetpack Workflow and host of the Growing Firm podcast. Today's guest is Markus Mantere. He is the Deputy Managing Director of Arkimera Robotics, an accounting technology company. The company develops self-learning algorithms that can be integrated into accounting software. So once integrated, the accounting software is updated with the capacity to learn from the humans' data entry and to take over their task. All right, so we're going to talk about what this means. What is self-learning technology, how it differs from a role-based machine learning piece of technology. We think this could have a big implication for accounting firms of the future. But first and foremost, Markus, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, and we're joking a little bit before for the podcast, and you know, they're in the news about every other week. And you had mentioned the podcast, you don't have a Facebook profile. So that's my first question for you. Why don't you have a Facebook profile?
Well, I think I quit Facebook about like 7 years ago or something when the grandpa generation started invading that social media. So it was simply time to move on. But I heard that more people have left just very recently. So I heard.
Yeah, I guess you're ahead of the curve. I mean, Facebook's in the news every other week. Obviously, you know, we're filming this in October. They just went through this huge scandal with a whistleblower, you know, leaking out papers. Yep. So maybe you're ahead of the curve. I wasn't sure if it was for data reasons or just for, I guess now it's the grandma reasons, the grandparents coming on to Facebook. Well, look, my first question for you is, you know, I talked about the intro and I threw around some big phrases, and I'd love to just start with kind of dissecting what is the difference between, you know, self-learning technology, which sounds like the future, versus this kind of like role-based automation through machine learning. Can you help the audience kind of understand what the differences are there?
Yeah, sure. So I'll try to frame this in terms that are understandable for people who are like not developers or not too technical. I guess the core audience here are accountants or people in the accounting space. So basically, if you look at automation in the accounting software space, just to take an example, when you look at automation of data entry from financial documents, such as invoices, receipts, and all other types of various documents that flows through that type of software. I mean, for a long time, there has been a lot of talk about, you know, this will all be automated, but in my opinion, it has been rather slow. And we come from a background of very simple, like settings in the software, like remembering the last account you used and, you know, strict rules like that. And recently we have some companies that have started utilizing machine learning models to be able to plow through a lot of documents through a machine learning model to get that model to learn how to automate this data entry. But the trouble with the solution is also that it only takes you so far. A lot of times they end up with a sort of more like a one-fits-all solution. The model will produce one result for everybody. That's very common. And other problems are also that it takes a lot of processing power, and often has to be complemented with human back office data entry. So, I mean, a lot of the most edgy companies when it comes to automation in the accounting space, to this day, they use a lot of outsourcing from like cheap labor markets such as India, Sri Lanka, and places like that. So and then we move on to what I strongly believe is sort of the new breed of technology that works in a way that is more adapted to the human end user, being like it could be a bookkeeper, an accountant, or even a small business owner. But so self-learning technology could be described as technology that can continuously, rapidly learn from data flowing through a certain software. So as an example, in this context, you see the the documents coming into an accounting software, like depending on what software you use, you can email an invoice into it, or you can snap a smartphone photo of a receipt or something and send it via email or via some app or something into the accounting software. And then the other piece of information is the data entry, typically performed mostly by humans, but also sometimes by like automated settings in the software. So if you add the self-learning algorithms right here in this very process, and you can learn from the content of the document, and you can learn from the data entry performed by a human, and you combine that knowledge and create like learning models continuously that learn how one particular company wants their data entry from all these different types of documents. And in the case of a machine learning model, which is a common approach today, you often have to retrain the whole model to get new results. As of the self-learning algorithms that I'm talking about here, they will continuously learn and can also relearn. If a human wants to make changes, the algorithms pick it up, and it's more like a human functions. Like perhaps the customer will call their accountant and say like, okay, we want to book this in a higher level of detail because we need better understanding of our financial health, for example, or some situation like that. So
okay. Well, let me see if I understand it correctly, right? So like it feels like the current state of machine learning driven automation is you're trying to create a model. So if you're pulling in a lot of receipts, you're trying to set up rules whereby, if it comes in from this place, always mark it as a restaurant or mark it as a marketing contractor. You're trying to set up rules and then feed as much data into that set of rules. So it's like every time they see that line item come in, it's like, yeah, I've seen this rule before. Great, apply it here. Great, apply it here. And it's trying to apply the rules. Whereas with self-learning, and that rule would be across all clients. Whereas with self-learning, it would be like, well, this client actually prefers this categorization this way. And I've picked that up by looking at all the data for this specific client file. And that's different from this other client file. So then the next level of learning models are going to be more customized to a client or a project or whatever you need it to be. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a very important point, because I mean the most simple example you can take in this situation. Let's say that you're an accountant, you're an accounting firm, and you work with two different customers, and both of them buy like a book. They purchase a book, but they will use it differently in their line of business, and therefore they will categorize it differently. So therefore, it's very important to be able to learn from a smaller set of data, fewer interactions with data, and to isolate this learning on a company level. So for customer A, the accountant will book it, categorize it as a particular purchase, and for customer B, they will categorize it as something else. And this knowledge of how to categorize the purchases are isolated on a company level, so that the accounting software appears as it can understand the differences between the different customers within that software. And you as the accountant, you do not have to go into settings, do any setup at all. As the algorithms are activated, you just keep on working just like you did yesterday, with the slight difference that the accounting software now has started to learn from your historical data entry and also keeps learning from your continuous data entry. And the learning is not that super important anymore as it has learned, because now the data entry will be automated. But in reality, you sometimes make changes also. So to be able to relearn is also it can be important in some cases as well.
Yeah. Well, without going maybe too far in the weeds, because I'm certainly not, a machine learning expert or an AI expert, but from what I understand, what you just mentioned, when you build something in kind of a machine learning base, you have to have a large set of data to feed that learning. You have to keep telling the algorithm, this is a house, this is a car, this is a house, this is a house, this is a car. We kind of see this in the recapture, right, where you're picking out images, where it's like kind of like helping, I think, Google categorize what an image actually is. And so you have to pull this large set of data, really feed into machine learning algorithms. But then, like you said, the output is then generalized across the board. So again, without going too deep, how is it the case where self-learning is actually obtainable? Because it doesn't feel like you need a large data set for it to actually start producing interesting insights. Like,
yeah,
how that happen? Like, what turn did we take in technology where they didn't need as much data input to start making better decisions for us?
Well, in this particular case, I would say that the answer to that question is by looking at the problem from a different angle. So if you, I'm not a developer myself, so I can't call myself an expert on the area, but if you're trained in AI, if you're trained in machine learning, you will probably approach the problem with a solution from that perspective. So what our developing team has done, I believe, is to approach the problem from a different angle. So we have built all our own technology from scratch, and they have all been created to solve one very hard to solve problem, and that is data entry from financial documents in the situation of bookkeeping. So I believe that that might be one way to answer the question. While machine learning is still very complex, there's really smart people that work with these machine learning models, and I'd say it's pretty early on. So of course we will also see development in that department. Could be worth mentioning as well.
Okay. Well, and pre-interview we're talking about, so you have a presence in Europe. I think that we're probably going to start hearing this a little bit more about the US. I want to walk through an example of the benefit you've seen in the accounting platforms that you deployed in Europe. But before we do, I want to clarify one thing. Walk us through, this is probably everybody on the call too. I think we got an understanding machine learning. Is self-learning considered artificial intelligence? Do people still say AI? Because you're right, like everybody who says, in my opinion, if you have AI in the name, that means you've outsourced it and there's somebody hacking away doing if-then statements, building it. So I think I'm very kind of skeptical of AI claims at this point, but I know it will be coming. But I guess, do you categorize this as AI, or is that a different world that belongs in kind of the machine learning bucket?
Well, there's a short answer and a long answer. I won't go into the long answer, but because that involves me reading like 5-6 different books on AI to try to understand what it is. So I believe it's often a word that is used more by the marketing department than by the developer team.
Okay.
We typically don't use the word AI, even though I believe it can be used for this type of technology, because it's some form of artificial intelligence. Our customers, our partners, our customers are typically software companies, like accounting software companies, right? And they call it AI. So they one of our partners has released a product called the AI Assistant, based on our algorithms working in the background, embedded in their user interface. So
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of the use of the phrase AI, simply because there has been I read an article about AI startups in Europe. Like I believe it was like I don't remember the percentage, but it was like 20-30% of them had some form of AI, and the rest had basically a pitch deck with the word AI. So it's a
Yeah.
word that is misused a lot.
Okay. Yeah. So if you need to raise money, maybe put it in there. If you need to
Yeah,
sell it
exactly.
internally, maybe
Mm,
maybe mention it. But outside
yep.
of that, people in the field don't use it as much. Well, this is a good segue. You mentioned an accounting platform that you had integrated with, and they created this AI assistant. So, help me and the audience visualize, what is this AI assistant doing in this accounting platform? Like, how is it
Yep.
appearing to the user? Like, what is it helping them with? And if you have like one or two examples, I think this would be great here.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the most important thing here is the value added for the end user, right? So let's get very quickly into that. Just I should mention one thing about sort of the mechanics behind it prior to that, and basically the algorithms are integrated as an API service. So we provide an API service. It's called Azora One, and any accounting software company out there, at least using the Latin alphabet, can integrate this API service into the accounting software. So what happens as this API service has been integrated is that basically the accounting software can now communicate with our algorithms through this API connection. So the API connection is like a communication link between two pieces of software, basically. I'm not sure how technically advanced your listeners are, but I think it could be good to explain. So once integrated, for example, in this particular customer of ours, our partner, they provide an accounting software for SME, small medium business companies and accountants, accounting firms. And what happens basically is that the first situation where the algorithm helps is as you email some sort of document into the software, or you upload some document into the software, an invoice, a receipt, like a salary document, tax document of some sort, all these types of financial documents. The first thing that happens is that the algorithm, by observing how humans have historically sorted the document. I mean, you have one user interface for the invoices and another one for receipts, for example. So the algorithm starts to learn how to sort the documents. It can understand what type of document it is. So you as the accountant can just provide an email address to all your different customers or directly to your customers' vendors. They email everything to one email address, and it gets sorted by the algorithms in real time directly in the user interface. So as you log into the accounting software, you will find the 5 new purchase invoices. You call them bills in the States, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Either or. We could
Purchase.
say POs, bills. Yeah. Either or. Either
Yeah.
or.
Okay. Okay. Anyways, as this as the bill enters the software, you will find them in the correct user interface, and the receipts will be in another user interface. And as you enter the user interface for example, invoices or bills, you will see all the data entry fields pre-populated right in front of you in accordance with how you would have done it yourself. So on the first bill, of course, you will find the base data, such as, I mean, total sum, VAT, dates, stuff like that. And you will also find one or more accounts um, for the categorization. So if you purchase different stuff from this particular vendor, you might want to categorize it on in a higher level of detail. And if you have a project code or something like that, the algorithms can learn that as well. And so that is the most simple functionality, the most simple to to explain. And the difference here, what happens in the background is that, as we talked about earlier, the automation of the data entry is based 100% on your and or your colleagues' data entry for this particular customer, meaning that it will be very precise in its understanding of the categorization, basically.
Okay, so if I'm comparing, and I have less familiarity with like a Dext or they formerly a receipt bank, it sounds like platforms that were built and they're trying to help with auto categorization or auto reconciliation, they're using a model whereby they try to build broad-based trends across all clients. And again, going back to earlier, your model is all about let's customize it for that initial client or customer within the file. That is the big difference that sounds like you all are going after versus maybe what folks have been doing. And nothing against Dext or Receipt Bank. I mean, look, if you want to come on the pod and talk about it, come on the pod and talk about it. We'll invite you on. But it sounds like that's maybe the difference between platforms that have been built maybe a little bit a while ago versus maybe the approach you're taking.
Yeah, and I'm not very familiar with how Receipt Bank or Auto Entry or anyone else actually solve this problem today. But I know, without mentioning any specific names, a lot of companies have used like outsourcing to solve those last sort of hard to solve situations or whatever. And this is 100% algorithmic, and there's no people in the only human in the loop is basically you, the end user, the bookkeeper, the accountant, or the business owner, and you still have to keep an eye on it. You still have to you are still responsible, of course. This is more about I'd say this is more about empowering the expert rather than automating away their work. So I still believe that this technology is better serving a professional user rather than some small business owner who doesn't really know much about bookkeeping, for example, because you can control it, you can tweak it in a manner that you yourself want. And I mean, if you're working in an accounting firm, you get a new customer with no history of digital documents, and what you can do in this situation, for example, in our partner software, is that you can clone the data entry knowledge from one or many other of your customers. And as you get a whole new customer who you never have done bookkeeping for prior. So let's say you have like a dentist customer, right? And then you get a new dentist customer. So you can clone the bookkeeping knowledge from the dentist customer to the new dentist customer, and you will get data entry that is, probably pretty close to how you'd want to do the bookkeeping for this new customer, because they purchased the same type of stuff from the same type of vendors, etc. And if you want to make changes, you make changes in the data entry, and the algorithms will relearn. So, and I think, also one important point here is also that that the delivery is sort of, it's live, is in real time. So, as if you, for example, you snap a smartphone photo of some financial document, send it into the accounting software, then you will have the result right in front of your eyes in the blink of an eye. And that kind of depends on how our partner, when they choose to perform certain pieces of communication with the API. So basically, what takes the longest time is the OCR conversion of the PDF bill, for example. That will take probably a second. Sometimes it takes 2 seconds. This is not our own technology. It's we use at the moment we use Google's OCR technology. So we believe they are best in class. We have tried a lot of different OCR providers, but the OCR conversion can take a second or two. But
so OCR is taking a look at PDF, screening it, and pulling out the data fields, right? So even if you haven't set up a PDF or a document with, hey, as a form per se, what the OCR technology can do is kind of look at it, extract the data, and then pair it with the appropriate fields. Markus, this has been a lot of fun to walk through. I think this is a really kind of interesting concept. I don't think it's being talked about enough in the space. You know, you mentioned that your core customers are really these accounting platforms that would integrate with you. And so I think some of our audience might be a part of those ecosystems. So I think they could probably reach out to you in a specific way. Obviously, a large percentage of our audience are just accounting and bookkeeping firm owners that trying to see what's next and stay ahead of the curve. But in either way, you know, if somebody wants to reach out and say thank you, connect with you, learn more about the company, what is the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, so I think the best way, if you want to reach out to me, is to visit my LinkedIn page, and you can also find my email address there. And if you're interested from a more professional perspective to use this technology, then I would suggest you visit our developer portal, which is developer.azora.one. And you can find a link to that from my LinkedIn page as well. And I mean, we partner with the accounting software companies, but the end user is typically a bookkeeper or accountant. So I'm very happy to chat with anyone in that line of business, because we always have a lot to learn from the end user, from the expert.
Awesome. So if you're a bleeding edge technologist listening to this show, you're on the front lines as a bookkeeper and accountant, and you are really jazzed up about what you just heard and want to connect with Markus, please do so. We're going to link up everything at jetpackworkflow.com/blog. That's jetpackworkflow.com/blog. If you enjoyed this interview, leave a review. That helps us get the word out. And if you really loved it, oh my gosh, Markus opened up our eyes to the self-learning technology, share it with a fellow firm owner that loves or needs to hear this type of information. Markus, it's been a real treat. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you very much. Thank you.